Today, what we're going to be talking about is assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of psychological disorders in children. So, this is a really important process that we have in how we actually work with kids. So if you are interested in becoming a clinical psychologist, this is definitely a huge part of what you would be doing. So what we're going to be doing today is really discussing what is the goal of assessment and what are our best practices to get assessment. In addition, I want you to kind of think about what your own assessment would be. I think this is actually a really important process for us to really think about, well, what would you include and what would you not include? And then we'll talk about how this relates back to what we had talked about before, which is the causes of disorders. So how can we think about the perspectives, such as the biological perspective, and how that assessment helps us to understand more about those causes? We'll also talk about how we can actually diagnose a child, either through a dimensional or categorical model of diagnosis. And we're going to talk about general treatment options. You've already been introduced to those evidence-based treatments. So we'll kind of further go along with those and kind of expand on that a little bit more. So let's start first with, what is assessment? So assessment is our way of gathering information about a particular case. So we want to reach out to children, their families, and maybe other people in that child's life to really understand what that child is going through, as well as how well they're functioning in their own lives. So when we're talking about the 4Ds, for example, that distress, dysfunction, danger, and deviance, we're assessing for some of that and whether or not, and how that all plays out in different parts of their environment, right? So in different sections of their microsystem or even in their exosystem. So we do lots of different types of assessments. Here on the left, you'll see that there are, there's just an interview with a parent and a child. You can also see that we do things like naturalistic observations and also things like own personal testing. So how that child is actually influenced. So if we really get down to what is the purpose or the reason for doing these assessments, it's really to check out, are there different types of disorders and does that child actually classify themselves under those disorders? So we can screen children. So we can really see, hey, is this autism? Is it anxiety? Is it ADHD? And we can go through these different types of screeners to see what is happening with that child. In addition, as I said before, we are going to identify the causes of the disorder or what is maintaining that disorder. We can also do a diagnosis. And another thing is actually planning out those interventions. So what are we going to do to help treat that child? And what are the things that we can do to improve their functioning? Another thing is that assessment is an ongoing process. So we really want to make sure that we monitor that treatment progress. So how is that child doing after 5 to 10 sessions of treatment? So what I want you to do right now is imagine. Pretend that you are a clinical psychologist and you have a child coming in for treatment. You want to conduct your own assessment. What are the things that you really want to find out about a child who's coming in, right? We already know that there is some sort of distress, dysfunction, danger, or deviance probably, if they're coming in for treatment. So what are the things that you want to know about? Who would you talk to? What type of information do you want to gather? And what methods would you use? So I want you to actually pause this video right now and jot down some notes for yourself. What type of assessment would you like to conduct? So hopefully you've had a chance to give a little pause, write down some questions that you'd like to ask a child and family who's coming in. You know, the number one thing I want to know is, Why are you coming in? But I also want to think about what are the different ways that I can assess a child. And one of the important things is the multi-method and multi-informant assessments. So there are different methods that we use. So the methods are just how do we go about doing an assessment? So the easiest one is a clinical interview. So if I had a child coming in for the first time, I might want to talk to that child. Hey, what's going on in your life? How are things going? I want to talk to the parents as well. We can also do observations. So for example, one child that I had, I decided to do a parent-child interaction and observe them as they were interacting on a puzzle. This puzzle was a little bit harder than what a child is normally used to working on. So how does that parent interact with the child? Is the parent directing the child to do something? Is the child just giving up and throwing the puzzle all over the place? How are they handling frustration together as a parent and child? So that might be one way that I can do an observation. Another thing that we really want to get is norm reference tests. So basically I want to give them something and say, where on this spectrum do you fall? So one norm reference test that you learned about in your book was the ASEBA, A-S-E-B-A, which includes the child behavior checklist and the youth self-report. So the child behavior checklist kind of looks at that child compared to all 10-year-olds in the United States. How does this 10-year-old child do with things like anxiety? Are they higher on that norm, or are they a lot lower? In addition, we can look at things like informal data gathering, so calling up teachers, calling up different people that are working with that child, just to get some different types of data about that kid. Another thing that we think is really important is having different informants. So we might want to think about interviewing or asking people to fill out norm reference tests. So we might want to talk to the child, the parents, both parents, teachers that child interacts with, their doctors or the pediatricians, as well as family members. So for example, I might give a child the youth self-report. So they're going to report on their own symptoms of internalizing and externalizing behaviors. I can also give that to the parent, to the teachers, and maybe a grandparent if the grandparents see that child a lot. So I want you to really think about this. Why would we want to use both a multi-method and multi-informant assessments? Well, just to clarify this, that we really want to get a lot of data from different people and in different ways because that child's behavior might differ across settings. So that child may act one way in school and another way at home. And there can be a lot of poor correlation between different types of people. So a mother and a father might see things differently about their child. So I'll just give you an example here. One child I worked with, parents said, you know what, struggling in school, teacher keeps reporting to us that he never talks, that he's alone by himself a lot of the time. Yet when he's at home, he is the most talkative child that I've ever met. And it was really interesting meeting this young boy because he was presenting very, very quiet in the room with me. But once I broke through that shell just a little bit, he was testing all the boundaries in my room. Like he would go up to the lights and turn it on, turn it off, just to see what my reaction would be. So while at first he was very shy and very quiet, by the time we broke through that shell a little bit, he was very outgoing. So this is where we mean that he can present in very different ways. So I want you to look through what you had written down for your own assessment. Does it actually have multi-methods? Does it have multi-informants? If not, what else could you choose? This video is going to stop right here, and we're going to talk about different parts of assessment and what they might actually tell us about different perspectives.